got a blinking light on my computer. What is that? Is there a blinking light? What's that say? What's that mean?
I don't know.
That means, I don't know, it's your star.
That's all.
Okay, so we are on YouTube and Facebook and every other place we need to be. Just YouTube, thank you.
I'll put this on Facebook.
I don't want to go on Facebook, I know. All righty.
Okay.
All right, so we are resoundingly attended today. Thank you all. Commissioner, we really appreciate you coming. If you want to bring you and whomever of your staff you want up here so that they can join you. I think it's important. Um, Madam Chair, do you have any comments?
Oh, we're ready to go.
All right. Senator Lesser, comments? Representative Gilchrist? All right, let's move along. So I think you have,
Madam Chair,
yes?
sorry, I just want to note for the record that Ranking Member Nuccio had a family emergency, unfortunately, and will not be able to attend this morning. I just want to note that for the record.
Thank you. I hope that everything's okay.
Me too. Thank you,
Letting us
Madam
know.
Chair. Thank you.
Appreciate that. And I have to have a call with you, Kathy. You talked to someone in Montville whose husband was killed on I-95 as a result of that plywood. And she wants to
Yes,
talk to us
yes.
about,
The parents are my constituents.
okay. So
We'll
let's
talk. Sounds
let's
good.
chat.
Thank you.
Calendar?
Oh, so you guys, hey, listen, I'm sorry. Commissioner, you have a PowerPoint for us or anything?
So we do, Senator. I'm just trying to figure, here we go. All right, Dave has it.
So you
Thank you.
can,
Yes.
the floor is yours.
All right.
We're very interested in the data that you have.
Good morning, chairs and ranking members and members of the Appropriations Committee. Thank you for having us here today to speak to you in this informational forum about HR 1 and providing a SNAP update. All right, next slide. Here we go. The HR 1 is a bill that it's about an 800-page bill, which we know is a pretty comprehensive one, but there are 4 provisions that are specific to SNAP that we have listed here. They are the funding eliminations for what we call SNAP Ed or SNAP Education. There are other slides that will explain this in greater detail. Our heat and eat restrictions, it really limits the categories of recipients that can now avail themselves of heat and eat. There are changes to the eligibility requirements for who qualifies as a non-citizen for eligibility. And as we all know, there are significant changes that have been made to the SNAP work requirements, keeping in mind that SNAP is a program that already had work requirements. They've just been enhanced very significantly with the changes in HR 1. Next slide. Thank you. To summarize the policy changes, you'll see there on the left side that we have our funding elimination for SNAP Ed, the heat and eat changes, the eligibility that I just spoke of, what we call the changes for the rules for our ABODs, our able-bodied adults without dependents, and the work requirements. The effective dates, as you can see, are coming up very quickly, some of which have already passed, meaning that the SNAP changes were actually made effective upon passage of the bill on July 4th. We only recently received some guidance from the federal government as to how those changes should be implemented, and they've given us a virtually non-existent window, I'll just describe it that way, in which to implement the changes. So we are working on them very quickly, and you will see that reflected in the slides. There are some things that have already happened. As you can see that the SNAP Ed funding has already been eliminated. We do have some carryover funds that we're using essentially as a run out for those programs, but there's nothing that can sustain it over time. And for some of our ABOD work requirements and our town exemptions, which I'll speak to in more detail, the changes there are pretty significant, and those will be happening very quickly within actually the next 2 to 2.5 weeks. Next slide, please. The question that we get quite frequently is how will we let everyone know what is happening, because there's so much that's going on. This is a timeline that we've put together as to when things will be happening. We already have many of the documents prepared, and we're working with our partners at OPM and the Office of the Governor to make sure that we have a cohesive and coherent message for all of our partners. So coming on the 14th, but we've pushed that back just a little bit because of a memo that we received on Friday regarding SNAP benefits. We do have a one-page document for our community partners. We've been meeting already with our community partners, particularly our community action agencies, who have there's really no way to describe how critically cooperative they've been, and the level of understanding they have about the need to work quickly and efficiently is really to be commended. We have video tutorials that we are putting together, and also in partnership with our medical ASO, CHN. They've been an incredible partner to us as well. And we will have website updates on our portal. There will be notices that will be going out to those who are affected by mail and text messaging, and you can see that here. And on November 30th, we will be sending what we are defining as closure notices to those who have already exhausted their 3-month eligibility. And let me just stop for a moment and speak a little bit to that. If you are not eligible for SNAP benefits, then you can only access those benefits for 3 months within a 36-month period. And because the rules have changed, we already know that there is a population of people to whom that change applies. And they have to be noticed of that change, and that notice will be going out on November 30th. If there's not a way for them to fit into another category of exemption, then they are at risk at not being able to access SNAP benefits. Also, on December 1st, the time limits for the remaining clients who do not have exemptions begins, meaning that they have to become in compliance or make substantial efforts to come into compliance according to the guidance that we have, again, which is limited and unfolding. But we really, as many states are, trying to do the best that we can to comply with the new SNAP rules. Next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, when we started to look at the outline, I'll talk a little bit more about the SNAP Heat and Eat. It really is a mechanism to unlock additional SNAP benefits for families who have heat in their household, and you can see it there, or have a shelter obligation. But that does not include heating or cooling. A shelter obligation is essentially rent, right? An obligation to pay something in order to be able to live. Under other circumstances, in order to qualify for the SNAP benefit, you'd have to prove that you meet specific deductions in order to be able to qualify for the SNAP benefit. The Heat and Eat was a program that it was a mechanism that allowed us to use the SNAP benefit, to use the LIHEAP benefit to unlock the SNAP benefit, so that it really lessened the burden on those of having to meet each one of those deductions that we would take from their gross income in order to determine whether or not they would qualify for SNAP. So if you thought about it kind of in the context of a standardized deduction, right? We'll just use that. So instead of them having to say, yes, my gross income is X, and then I also pay for this, and I pay for that, and I pay for the other thing, and I have this other obligation, and therefore I meet the threshold for SNAP. This essentially eliminated some of that and just said, all right, well, if you get the $20.01, which is what we were paying, it unlocks that for you, and then you don't have the burden of having to figure that out. That is now gone for virtually every category of SNAP recipient, with the exception of those who have a household in which someone is elderly or disabled. So if we have working parents, if we've got people who are working multiple jobs, if we have any number of categories of people who are accessing SNAP under the Heat and Eat, none of those people are eligible anymore. And that box in the middle of the slide really outlines how many households are impacted by this change, essentially what the monthly loss is to them, and what the overall loss is, because we're no longer able to apply the Heat and Eat, I just call it unlock our mechanism to the 50,000 households anymore. Next slide, please. The other change that's substantial under HR 1 is the change of SNAP eligibility for certain non-citizens. So you can see on the left side of the slide, there were a number of categories of citizens and non-citizens who could qualify for SNAP. And that includes our COFA citizens, refugees, asylees, victims of trafficking, victims of domestic violence, Afghan or Iraqi special immigrants. Those special immigrants are particularly those that served as a support to the troops that were on the ground. They were navigators, they were translators, they kept our troops safe. And in exchange for that, or in appreciation, say in a very different way, in appreciation for their work, they were given an opportunity to come to the United States. All of those categories have now been eliminated, and you can see now that SNAP eligibility is strictly limited to those that are lawful permanent citizens, essentially with a green card, Cuban and Haitian immigrants, and COFA citizens. And there's a note there that describes what the COFA citizens are, which is essentially Micronesia and the Marshall Islands. So that means that victims of trafficking, domestic violence, and those that came under Afghani or Iraqi special immigrant status are no longer eligible for SNAP benefits under the new law. Next slide, please. Thank you. Now, speaking more specifically around the work requirements, our current state, well, the current state as of July 3rd, was that adults that were ages 19 to 54 were covered by SNAP, but we can see, excuse me, and they had work requirements at the time. That wasn't a problem. The age is now raised to 64, so now we have an entire cohort of people who weren't covered before who must find some sort of employment, volunteerism, be in school, or meet some other definition of community engagement. We also had an exemption for adults who were caring for children who are under the age of 18. We had some veterans and those who are experiencing homelessness, children who were aging out of foster care, and other waivers I'll probably ask DC Hadler to speak to the waivers. I think that were probably more efficient and less torturous for all of us if he did that. So we'll have him do that. To speak to the waivers about the towns that lack sufficient jobs.
Excuse me, Commissioner, I just want to,
Absolutely.
there are people that have their hands up. We're not going to ask any
Okay.
questions now when we come back
Okay.
after the whole presentation is done. So Representative Baker, I see that you have your hand up, but we'll come back to you as soon as we're done with the whole presentation.
Thank you, Senator. I can't, for all those online, I can't see you, so I don't know.
No, I
If your
that's
hand
why
is up or not.
I
Okay.
agree. And I just
Okay.
want to make sure that people know we're not ignoring them, that we're just going to wait
Okay.
until you're done with your whole
All
presentation.
right. Thank
Because
you.
you may answer the question
Yes,
going along.
it's very likely. Yes. So thank you. So our future state, which is actually our current state, means now that we have an entire decade that's been added to the age in which people now have to either work or meet the community engagement requirements. The adult exemption for those who are caring for children under 18 has now been lowered to those caring for children under 14. There are a number of exemptions that have been removed for veterans and those experiencing homelessness, and those who are under the age of 24 who've aged out of foster care at 18. And also later, Deputy Commissioner Hadley will speak to the limitations on the geographic waivers. But very generally, there were some very generous waivers that allowed us to determine whether sections of the state or particular municipalities had unemployment rates that were at 10% or more. And if those unemployment rates did apply, then we could use those waivers to exempt groups of people from working. That waiver has changed considerably, so those exemptions no longer exist. Next slide, please. So Deputy Commissioner Hadler, if you don't mind.
Happy to. Good morning, everyone. Happy to pick up here and talk a little bit more about a couple of the changes on HR 1 in particular that impacts the ABOD or able-bodied adult without dependent population. And this is an overview of how that functions as far as our town or geographic waiver has worked over time. We've been able to, under prior law, prior to the HR 1's passage, been able to exempt geographic areas around the state due to a lack of available jobs. There's a formula that was in place that allowed us to identify towns and contiguous areas where we were allowed to provide an exemption from work requirements due to the economic circumstances in each of those locations. That changed with HR 1 so that only towns or areas with an unemployment rate of greater than 10% can be exempted from the work requirements. And there are no towns in the state of Connecticut where there's a 10% or higher unemployment rate. Therefore, all of the towns that had previously been exempt no longer are. So residents in these towns will now need to comply with the ABOD work requirements or identify another exemption from those work requirements in order to maintain their SNAP benefits. As you can see from the map here, we've identified the 68 towns that were still covered under a town exemption. And this waiver that we had through the Food and Nutrition Services of USDA is going to expire on November 2nd. This was a very recent communication that we just received from our federal partners that the end of this waiver had to be effectuated within 30 days of a recent communication, hence the November 2nd date. So what this means is that for individuals who or will now be subject to the ABOD work requirements, their clock will start ticking. The 3 months within a 36-month period that they are otherwise eligible for will be the guidepost by when their benefits may end. And as the commissioner referenced earlier, some of these individuals have already exhausted their 3 benefits prior to being picked up by the town exemption. So for that population, starting in December, about 1,500 individuals who had previously been covered by a town exemption will have their SNAP benefits end because they will have exhausted their 3 months, unless they can establish that they are subject to another exemption. A simple example of that might be if they are pregnant now, that would be an exemption from the work requirements so that they could then be covered under another category. Barring those additional information, they will lose their coverage. This same thing will play out for the remainder of the population over the course of the next 3 months. And a total of about 20,000 people who had been covered by this town exemption will no longer have that as an avenue from being exempt from work requirements. And we have just one note up there that I just want to highlight too, especially now that we are talking about population which does include families with children. Previously, the acronym for ABOD was able-bodied adults without dependents, but now the work requirements do apply to some families with dependents, for example, those with children between the ages of 14 and 18. If the individual, for the parent in such a family, is not able to comply with the work requirements, the children would continue to receive benefits, but their household benefit would shrink in accordance with taking that one non-compliant person out of the calculation for the SNAP benefits. So it's not a total closure for families if a parent is not able to meet work requirements, but the benefit size will shrink by the number of eligible people in the household. Sure, and go to the next slide, and I'll pass it back over.
Okay. Thank you, DC. This next slide really provides a summary of everything that we just spoke about. So we think that it's a more succinct summary of where we are. So we have our current exemptions, our new exemptions, and our continued exemptions. And as DC Hadley just spoke about, we see that the waiver no longer exists for those towns that have an unemployment rate that is greater than 10%. Next slide, please. This slide really gives you a greater amount of detail with respect to the numbers of people who will be impacted. So the members column that you see there is really the totality of people who fit into those 2 categories of people who are between the ages of 55 and 64, and those who are otherwise impacted by the ABOD exemptions. Those that are likely to be compliant or given the existing information that we have is about 33,000 for those between the ages of 55 and 64, and we believe about 18,000 people will fit into the exemptions of the total amount that we have listed there. However, in that last column, as you can see to the far right, those are really the individuals that are most at risk with respect to the ABOD time limit. So that's about 11,000 people in the newly expanded age limit category and about 25,000 people. So we do believe that if we cannot in some way either move them into another exemption category or they don't meet the requirements, that we have about 36,000 people in these new categories that are at risk of losing their SNAP benefit. And that's with our current data that we've been using. The next slide gives you a sense of where we have the newly non-exempt ABOD work requirements by the percentages of the town's population and also by the numbers of people that we think will be impacted in each one of the towns. We thought that this were probably we refer to these internally as heat maps that can really give you a sense of where the impact will be throughout the state. You can see that the one on the left in terms of the total beneficiaries, I think really gives you a truer picture of what we say all the time, that there really isn't a town in this state where there is not a SNAP recipient. So forgive me, I'm an English major, I completely botched that, but there is a SNAP recipient in every single state, in every single town, city, hamlet, village in the state of Connecticut. The numbers vary, but they are all there. And so we can see where the impact is. It is where we thought it would be, right, in some of our larger towns, more populous towns, but we can also see there's pretty significant impact. The shades are not that different on the eastern side of our state and also in the quiet corner. Next slide, please. Next, we'll speak to the SNAP error rate. And again, I may ask, I not, I will not, may, I will ask DC Hadler to also join me in this discussion. So just as a point of education, and I'm sure everyone here understands what it is, but the SNAP error rate really does help manage and measure how accurately we administer SNAP benefits at DSS. And there are a number of components that are involved in measuring the SNAP error rate. John Jakubowski, who's our quality assurance and quality control director, is here today if you have very specific questions about how that works. But generally, the errors include the overpayments as well as the underpayments. SNAP error rates are determined by our own internal analysis of those rates, and then we are then obligated to turn that information over to the federal government that then makes a determination about our rate, and that is done individually by state, and then we are ranked within all of the 50 states in the union. Next slide, please. We're often asked the question, what contributes to the SNAP error rate? So there are two distinct categories in which the SNAP error rate falls. It's either errors that we make as an agency or errors that our clients make. Now, errors has a very large definition. It's not as if we're making deliberate mistakes in actually calculating the SNAP benefit. Of course, we're all human. That does happen from time to time. But what often happens is that, as you can see, the highest percentage of the error is in wages and salaries. And what that means is that because we have so many people that work multiple jobs that receive SNAP, and people that have who are very much a part of our gig economy in the United States in general, and in Connecticut in particular, it's very challenging to be able to collect accurate wage and salary data from individuals who have multiple jobs, and often where the work may be seasonal, it may vary from week to week. This is really where the challenge is. I would say, and I think this has been our observation, that our SNAP recipients are really trying to do their best to report that information as accurately as possible. But if, let's just take a rideshare driver, if they're driving 25 hours in one week and they're driving 14 hours the following week, they don't necessarily have the capacity to continue to report that constantly, nor do we always have the capacity to be able to take the information in at the rate at which it comes to us. And those things actually contribute to our SNAP error rate, particularly in that largest category. Household compositions change, just moving to the next two categories there, as do the shelter deductions, meaning that rents go up and down, people have different circumstances under which they live, and sometimes that has an impact on their household composition and their shelter deduction. So those top three categories really contribute the greatest to the agency error rates and the client error rates, because when we don't get accurate information from our clients, then it's hard for us to be accurate, and then vice versa if we're not taking the time to make sure that we're properly calculating their SNAP benefit, then that's an error rate on our part too. Yeah, so that is where we are with client versus error rate for SNAP. Next slide, please. So more specifically, we thought it would be helpful to understand what the penalties are related to the SNAP error rates. This might not be familiar to everyone. At the top of the screen are the error rates as they've been defined by HR1, meaning that if you have a SNAP error rate that's under 6%, then your additional state contribution to SNAP is 0. And you can see the increments by which it rises based on the size of your error rate. So if you're at 6, excuse me, terrible allergies, to close to 8, then it's 5%, and then so on. And then anything 10% or above, you can pay up to 15% of your SNAP benefit as a penalty for being 10% or more. Right now, as we're calculating our SNAP error rate, I think we are at 8.7%, and you can see that our projected annual SNAP distributions are there. We annually pay about $885 million in our SNAP benefits every year, which is equivalent to about $75 million a month. And it sounds like it's a lot of money, but it really averages to about $190 per household. So it's not a significantly sized benefit. And at the bottom of the screen, you can see that we have our US average, which is about 11.68%. These are all numbers from FNS. And then the average is about 10.93 for FY 2024, and the average is 10.38, so it's going down. We are right now at 8.7%. We're working very hard to make sure that we stay within that particular range are moving ourselves down as quickly as we can. It's not an easy thing to move, as I just mentioned, but we're doing the best that we can. And it will fluctuate because we're only about halfway through the year. But we have a very sharp eye on what is happening with our SNAP error rate. And to that point, I will go to what I believe is our last slide, and I will ask Deputy Commissioner Hadler to walk through our initial actions that we're taking to continue to reduce our SNAP error rate.
What is FNS?
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
The Food and Nutrition Services, there are
I
federal partners
apologize.
that oversee the SNAP program within the U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA.
Yes.
We are all in the fishbowl, but the people outside aren't.
I
so
apologize.
That's okay.
Yes,
That-
I apologize. Yes.
That's our job.
All right.
Thank you. And so as the commissioner just described, right, we've got a tall task ahead of us. Connecticut has consistently been ahead of the national average. We do better than most states in our payment error rate, but that is not enough to keep us out of having to have a state contribution under the new structure under HR 1. So we are laser focused on working on driving that rate down, obviously with a goal to get below 6% so that the state is not required to contribute to the cost of SNAP benefits. And just for additional context, it's important to understand that historically, the SNAP benefits themselves have always been 100% federally funded until HR 1. So that's the new provision that we are working against is we will now as a state be required to contribute to the overall cost of those benefits depending on the payment error rate. So we are taking a number of actions. This is sort of a multifaceted and across the board approach to addressing this issue. We are expanding our eligibility supervisory reviews. So this is when cases are, they get a second level of review just in the regular eligibility process. We will be conducting those more frequently. We are targeting our local quality control staffs to engage on the top error and most error-prone cases. We will be expanding training for our eligibility staff on techniques and methods for tackling payment error rates as a high priority for the agency. We are holding more frequent meetings. These have already begun and accelerated between our quality assurance and eligibility staff as we review the trends and different kinds of errors that we're finding. We're looking at some policy options and waivers that will help us to streamline determinations. For example, we are looking into a self-employment standard deduction for individuals who are self-employed in order to not have to be basically a tax preparer and reviewer as part of the eligibility process, to take a standard number to be able to apply in the SNAP eligibility calculation, which is something that other states have done and hopefully will simplify our ability to do those calculations. We are looking very closely at technology and vendor options to help support and our work in targeting high-risk cases. We've been working closely with partners at Yale to help develop a new methodology for identifying the most error-prone cases that will help us to guide us in our work. And we are looking to engage vendors potentially to help support us in refining some of our eligibility processes, conducting more enhanced case reviews on error-prone cases and items along those lines. And we're also looking to try and find new data sources to help verify eligibility more accurately and frequently. As the commissioner noted, we've got a lot of folks who receive SNAP benefits who have very fluctuating incomes and rents, and their family compositions will change. So we're trying to identify whether there are more sources where we can find out about that information proactively, as well as providing the opportunity for clients to provide that information. It is a challenge when 60% of your error rate is driven primarily by information that may not be reported or reported timely. That is something that is hard for the agency to control, though we want to be able to give our clients the greatest opportunity and access to be able to report changes that might impact their benefits and to educate them about the right time, and also look at data that we may have that flags a case to say, you reported one number for your income, we're seeing a different number over here, we need to reconcile that in order to avoid payment errors. So that is a list of the things that we are doing actively to address the payment error rate.
All right. And that actually brings us to the end of our presentation. So we want to thank you for giving us the time to speak about what is happening with HR1 and SNAP, and we're happy to answer any questions that you might have.
And thank you very much, Commissioner. And so before we go into questions, there's a couple of other things that both Representative Walker and I want people to know. One, we'll provide this slide deck to everyone so that you have it, and also to our media partners so that they have the exact data. And you will also be getting, Representative Walker and I have been working with the other state agencies and two of them have given us information on food programs relative to the Department of Agriculture, and so DOAG and the State Department of Education have given us data on food programs that we think will also be needed to add into the mix because people are getting food in different ways. And so this is not just a SNAP issue that we need to look at. We need to look at all of the components of food, and we're also going to be talking with the Department of Aging, which we have not finished that or even started that conversation with them yet, so that we can make sure that we're paying attention to seniors and those with disabilities that might get services through another mechanism, but ultimately the goal is to make sure that we're feeding people. And because we have a system that is set up in silos for different groups, that not everybody is going to be found, as you have sort of looked at. And then lastly, just so that you understand what we're trying to do here, there was a part of the slide deck that talked about the interface of LIHEAP with food. If the and I suppose there are many people that are trying to guess when we're going to not have the shutdown any longer. But we have enough money in the state to cover LIHEAP from now through November or a portion of November. We need to get money from the federal government in order to continue LIHEAP payments and cover people when it's going to be the coldest part of the winter, December, January, February, very cold. And right now, we don't know that we're going to have that money coming in, and we can't guarantee it's going to happen. And so we may be addressing some of that to have resources available as we continue to move forward. So if we have resources available for SNAP and other food sources that people are involved in, and LIHEAP, it doesn't mean that whatever we do, we're going to spend all that money, but it does give us an idea of having the capacity to spend it should we need to spend it. And I think I'm confusing Claudio because he's got a confused look on his face. I'm trying to say that the bill, should we go into special session, and we hear, as you do in the paper, but should we go into special session, we may make some qualifications for resources that may ultimately get covered by the federal government. But we have to do this in a mechanism so that it's available for us to do should we need to do it. It's sort of where I am on that. So we'll go into questions and answers. And so I have a couple questions, and I probably have, like everybody else, about 50 questions. And so I understand that we're not going to ask 50 questions. We'll try to stick to the 2-question rule, for lack of not really a rule per se, but
For flow.
the flow. Good idea. And so one of the things that you talked about was veterans and those folks. So could you go into that a little bit more? Veterans that are homeless, who received services. Is it no veteran that's homeless receives services anymore this way, or how does that work?
It's a good question. It is a little bit complex. There are certain exemptions that we have been able to apply in the program over the last few years for 2 separate categories. One being veterans as a category, and another being individuals who are experiencing homelessness. There are still opportunities to be exempted under prior exemptions for individuals who have chronic homelessness. which is a slightly different definition, and the information that we would need to gather to establish that is slightly different than just more straightforward examination of someone who's experiencing homelessness at the time they apply for benefits. We do have some numbers. We estimated that about 5,000 people were currently covered by an exemption under the prior definition of homelessness some of them are going to be at risk. Some of them will qualify for another exemption. For example, that they perhaps also have a disability that will allow them to be exempt under that category. And the number of folks who had the veteran exemption specifically was about 300 individuals. Again, some of these people may have overlapping exemption categories, but we did estimate that there are about 300 of the veterans and 5,000 folks who were under the homelessness exemption are now in that at-risk pool, some of whom will qualify for another exemption, but some of whom may be subject to work requirements and without additional information about their income, or community engagement activity, they potentially will lose benefits.
Thank you. And my second question is, has there been a calculation done? So food pantries augment a lot of services. Has there been a calculation done that would indicate how many more people are going to head to their local food pantry to completely replace what they were getting for SNAP benefits? Is that available at all?
We've not done a specific calculation. What we have done is provide this number of 36,000 that we believe are the ABODs that are at risk of falling off of SNAP to Food Share. And so they're actually engaging in determining what the impact will be. I don't know if there'll be an ask to be able to accommodate the additional people that will come, but we've been in very close communication with Food Share and letting them know what the numbers look like, keeping them up to date, and the calculations that we've made about the numbers of people that we think will maybe move into exempt categories and others that won't. So that's what we know right now. I don't have any specific numbers as to what a dollar amount equivalency would be that they may ask for.
Okay. Thank you. Representative Walker.
Thank you, and thank you, Commissioner, and your team. I mean, I am sure that the hours that you guys are committing to this is more than what we can ever imagine. So just on behalf of all of us, thank you for your detail, and thank you for saying all of the avenues as opposed to giving us a few here and a few there. You're giving us the opportunity to make solid decisions about things, hopefully in a positive way as we go forward.
Thank you.
So you identified different categories that I had not even thought about, or and there was some ongoing numbers that you created as you went through them. Have you tallied up the number of people that because there was town exemption, dependent exemption, heat and eat exemption, ABW with the new definition exemption. And I think you had a slide 9 that had popular numbers, but then there is also a new 36,000 that are newly in jeopardy of losing SNAP. So if you haven't got that amount identified, could you get that to us? Because I mean, I'm looking at a number that says 44,000, but that number of 44,000 has eroded in your slides. So I want a bottom line number, and I would ask that you guys give us that bottom line number so that we can understand the universe of what we're talking about. In that we will go through and get the determinations, but we need to know the percentage of people in Connecticut that are going to be impacted by the changes just from SNAP. Okay?
Understood.
So that and I think that's critical for all of us. And then you also talked about the agencies, like community action agencies and things like that. That I think is very important. So have you started getting a staff addition, or has OPM provided you with additional fundings for things to help aid you, because you did not have the staffing for this before, but now you know that you have to have that staffing. So the staffing for your agency inside and then for your partners outside, are the contracts going out so that we can be assured that we are not taking advantage of the agencies out there? Because they do have to eat too.
That's correct.
So I want to make sure that everybody who's part of your team is being paid adequately, because we should not have that happen. So
Yes, so thank you for the question. Internally, yes, our OPM partners have been extraordinarily cooperative and supportive of the work that we need to do for complying with the changes in SNAP for HR1 and for Medicaid as well. But we're really focusing on SNAP because that's the one that has the closest deadline and the greatest degree of urgency. As we reported during our MAPOC meeting, we do have additional resources for our call center to hire more staff internally in our eligibility operations, and essentially to shore us up so that we can actually do the work that needs to get done in order to be able to support those who will not be exempt from the work requirements. So just want to thank them publicly for understanding the urgency of that and moving quickly. Externally, we have asked our community action agency partners to provide to us a budget as to what they may need in order to be able to provide more support, to be a trusted messenger and a partner with us, so that essentially they can, with those that are not going to be eligible, I'm sorry, those that will fall outside of any kind of exemption and then be subject to the work requirements. There are a lot of people, as you saw. So, and they are in different parts of our community, and they feel very comfortable talking to the community action agencies. Not only are we putting together materials that they can use to help guide and determine whether or not a person would either be exempt or be subject to the work requirements, they will also need to be able to take in volunteers and to do perhaps provide volunteer opportunities so people can remain eligible. These are some of the things that the community action agencies have been talking to us about. We fully expect that they would want to receive compensation for that. So we've asked them for those budgets, and they're working on that this week.
thank you. That makes me feel good, because there are multiple levels of our population that are impacted, and we have different methods of communicating with those. And I know, especially for the homeless, the vets, people, families with children, those are the ones that I know Community Action Agency has a direct
Yes.
pipeline into. So that makes me feel very happy. So going into the next phase of this, the dates that you gave us, so these impacts are going to really be around now.
Yes.
And it's an inordinate amount of new people that you're going to have to be bringing in. How are your systems handling this drive that we're trying to do now? Do you have the systems in place? Do you have, are we looking at systems? I mean, is AI part of us? Or what are we doing?
Yeah. So all of that is happening. We have some systems that are in place, but we're seeing an increase in the numbers of people who are actually coming in who are quite anxious about what's occurring. They're hearing that SNAP is changing. They're wondering about whether or not they are remaining eligible, which is why you saw the timeline that we included around expanding our communications. We will be talking, as I mentioned in the earlier part of my presentation, to make sure that our messaging is consonant with the governor's office and with our partners at OPM, so that's consistent and we're not creating panic, because that's the last thing that we want to do. We're answering the questions that people are posing. We're going to be providing some talking points for our staff so they can have a consistent message that they are providing to everyone who comes in and everyone who calls who is concerned. And as I mentioned earlier, our OPM has provided us the ability to add more resources. With respect to the systems, there were things that were already happening. So one of which is that we had already updated, and actually we're doing this in the next week, our IVR, our integrated voice response system, which is essentially our phone system, which is not ideal right now, but will be more ideal once we get it integrated and introduced into our workflow. And that will allow people to really engage in more self-service. And we will have automated ways to answer the questions as to whether or not you are either exempt from the work requirements or they apply to you. We're actually also working on what is known as a decision tree, so an online tool that people can use that will ask them a series of questions about their current circumstances, and they can get a very general sense from that as to whether or not they would be exempt or whether or not the rules would apply to them, and then give them direction as to where they can go to get more information and to get more guidance. And this is why the community action agencies are so critical, so that they can sit down with someone and have a conversation. Because we need community partners to do this. We wouldn't by ourselves have the capacity to answer all of those questions for everyone. And we want people to be able to get answers quickly and honestly and thoroughly. And that's why we need to do it in partnership with our community.
Thank you. I appreciate everything that you said, and I hope that all of our partners are stepping up to the plate with what they can help.
They are.
And I hope that Yale is donating their time.
They are.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Yes. Senator Lesser?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So, we've heard that there's already been the $40 million unfunded mandate put on the state for the operation of SNAP. And then in addition to that, we have to get our error rate down, or else we're going to be essentially fined $120 million for the operation. And I'm glad to hear that there have been some funds freed up to make changes, but it seems to me that $120 million is more than a DSS problem. That's an all of government problem. And we need an all of government solution to figure out how are we going to support this program and avoid getting hit with that fine. So, following up on Representative Walker's questions, we need to automate the process wherever we can. We've got the separate issue for Medicaid work requirements. We have the SNAP work requirements. How are we going to be able to get the data sources and automate this as much as possible, so we relieve the burden on the specific client to the extent possible, and then we relieve the burden on DSS, but figure out how to get these data systems, whether it's at DOL or DRS or wherever the data is in state government, to make sure that you have timely and accurate data, and that we can build a comprehensive strategy to make sure that you're able to succeed. So we can't just do this piecemeal where we're plugging in the call center one week and then trying to solve another problem next week, but we have a comprehensive strategy to support you and get you below that threshold.
Yes. So thank you for the question. What I failed to or forgot to mention when Representative Walker posed her question is that not only have we received support from OPM, we've also pursued federal support through an advance. I won't use any more acronyms. It's an advanced planning document, also known as an APD, that states were able to file and support in order to get federal funds to do some of the systems work. So that APD has already been filed. We've had some response from the federal government in ways in which they want us to refine it. So we've already pursued those options. We also very recently received a technology grant that also allows us to do some of the work that we need to do. But your question is really more about integration and work amongst agencies. So particularly the Department of Labor has been very helpful to us in determining how quickly we can get data. We've been having lots of really productive conversations with them. They have their own restrictions around ways that data can be used in federal rules, but to the extent that those rules can be flexible with obviously without violating any federal laws or regulations, they're very willing to help us, which would be very helpful. Data for employers is reported quarterly. We need data almost at the moment. And there really is no mechanism that's available to that does not have, there are some vendors that have made a representation that they can do that for us. So we're exploring that, and we're not really sure what the veracity of that is. But we know that that's what we need. But right now, employer data is reported quarterly, that wage data. And whether or not it can be reported more frequently is something that the Department of Labor has been really cooperative in helping us explore.
My understanding is that until recently, we actually had a statutory requirement that data be recorded monthly. I don't think it was ever implemented, but I think, I know that may be a conversation for the Labor Committee, and they're not in the room, but
Perhaps.
That's not a question, Madam Chair, but I think we should have that conversation, because that was a requirement, and maybe we should implement it.
Yeah.
We're also, this conversation has been around HR1, and HR1 certainly critically important, but we're also in the midst of a government shutdown, and 2 weeks from tomorrow, 275,000 households, 425,000 people are going to lose their food. And I see Deputy Commissioner Hadler frowning, so I think that's right. But I think that's right, unless the President and Congress reopen the government, and that's obviously a concern to all of us. And I just want to know what our contingency options could be. Obviously, we hope there's a resolution, but my understanding is that the 2017 architecture that you have does not permit what we had before, which was we used to have, I think prior to 2008, a state-based SNAP benefit, which we no longer have, and we no longer have the mechanism to provide. So what can we do? I mean, we have our food banks. We also, I know you have a vendor contract with Conduent, I think is the name
We
of the
do.
vendor. There's the comptroller or the Department of Revenue Services could potentially issue cash to people. I'm just not sure what's going to happen once people, who are relying on, the lowest income folks in the state who are relying on this benefit, potentially could run out of food in a couple weeks. I don't know.
Senator, I'm going to leave Deputy Commissioner Hadler to answer this question. So my phone has rung 3 times with a person that never calls 3 times. So I do feel that I need to just step away from a moment to see what's going on, if you don't mind.
Not,
Okay.
I totally understand.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Happy to step in. Thanks, Senator Lester. It's this, yeah, much of what you just said is correct, right? Right now, we received a memo from FNS, the Food Nutrition Services, at the end of last week, alerting us that we should not submit files for benefit issuances in November because the federal government has identified that they do not have funding to provide those benefits due to the shutdown. We are planning right now about various options that we might be able to take, but I do want to respond to a couple of the suggestions you made to provide a little bit more information. You are correct that once upon a time we did have a state-funded SNAP program that did leverage the federal system to issue state-funded benefits. We do not have the structure for that program within our current newly updated system because the program had been off the books for so long that we didn't build it into the new system. Even if it were there, we may have challenges because of the way that the federal government has represented that they will stop the issuance of SNAP benefits if the shutdown persists into November. The simplified way of understanding it is they will basically turn off the retailer network for where you can redeem your SNAP benefits. So, even if people have benefits showing on their cards or they're potentially eligible, they wouldn't be able to redeem them. And that is one of the tools that the federal government has indicated that they would use to ensure that they, that people aren't trying to redeem funds that they currently say that they don't have funding to provide. So this is, obviously very concerning. We are working on trying to help people understand the options while we obviously watch every single day what happens with the shutdown and the communications that are coming out of the federal government. As far as other options, I think those are things we can consider. I would just put one caveat and caution out there that it is very unlikely under the current structure of the SNAP program that if we were to issue cash benefits, for example, to people, that they would be reimbursed by the federal government absent some special legislation. So those would be entirely state funded with no likelihood of federal reimbursement. Very happy to, think through other options that may be possible. I'm not sure that they're going to be wonderful because it's very hard to replace a program like SNAP on short notice.
Understand. And if I just have a quick follow up to that, any thoughts on potentially leveraging our contract with Conduent to ask them to come up with a solution that they could provide with their
Which
their network?
counts as your second question,
Okay.
Senator, just saying.
No, I'm good. This is yeah.
It's important, but I just want to make sure that we're just, because so other people get it.
Absolutely.
Yes, 7
All right.
So I'm going to attempt to answer that question. Yes, we are having conversations very actively with Conduent. So Conduent is the vendor who, takes the files that we send them where we indicate people are eligible, and they do the function of loading the benefits onto the EBT card so that they can then be used. They have been proactively in conversation with states around the country. They provide that service for many states nationally. We can certainly continue to have those conversations and see what our options may be. It's very challenging, though, when the other side of that process is out of the hands of both states and vendors and really lies in the hand of the federal government as to sort of identifying what retailers are able to accept the benefits. So conversations worth having that are ongoing, but it may be out of our collective hands at some level.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Representative Gilchrist.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to echo what Representative Walker said. Thank you so much to your entire department and team for everything you're doing day in and day out. much of this is it feels very cruel. And what you explained about the ABOD, is that how we say that? And that there are no towns that actually qualify that have 10%. Just seems horrible that when someone can't access work, now they're not going to be able to access food either. My questions are two. I'll do the two. With the heat and eat, I just don't think I understand it fully. So if someone qualifies for a LIHEAP, they can then potentially automatically, this is the current, what was going on, they would automatically qualify for SNAP. Going forward, would individuals be able to still apply for SNAP? If they, can you just explain what changed, what it was and what changed?
Well, essentially, go ahead. So what changes our ability to almost automatically qualify people by not having them go through every single standard, essentially qualifying. Well, I'll let Peter explain it. It's hard. It's harder to explain it. Go ahead.
No, it is. It is a complex process. The most important, I think, thing to understand about the LIHEAP heat and eat function is allowed us again to use those LIHEAP dollars to unlock additional benefits. It doesn't necessarily exclude a person from being enrolled in SNAP. They may have SNAP, but by getting that additional bit of LIHEAP funding, it allows us to use a standardized utility allowance, or a SUA that we call it as in our land of acronyms. And that in turn would allow a person's total overall income to be lower, which increases their SNAP benefit amount. So individuals who benefited from heat and eat will still receive their SNAP benefits, but they will not have a simplified process for calculating their benefits. The estimates that came out of the Congressional Budget Office about the impact of this, they said that they conservatively estimated that the impact would be about $100 per person per month, or per household per month, which is where we get those numbers that are very large that we presented to you all. So if you imagine that 50,000 approximate households around the state of Connecticut have benefited from this process, and they will no longer be able to take advantage of it, they will still have SNAP benefits, but the amount of their benefits is going to shrink by about $100 a month, and $100 a month times 50,000 people over the course of a year is $62.5 million.
Wow. So the benefit will reduce and they'll have to do like double applications.
Yes. This never conferred automatic eligibility. I just want to clarify
Okay.
that. This was a tool that was used for people who are already receiving SNAP to help ensure that their calculation was simplified and that they were able to access the full amount of SNAP benefits that they would have without having to provide a lot of paperwork about their utility processes. So it simplified the process for everyone and generally resulted in people being able to access more SNAP benefits. So there is a possibility that some of these households will be able to go through a process and provide that paperwork, document their utility costs, and be able to maintain their SNAP benefits, but it can be substantially more complicated. And there will be some households who simply don't have that as a pathway, and they will see their SNAP benefits reduced as a result.
And reducing a SNAP benefit when groceries are skyrocketing is not the best time. And then my second question, you mentioned that the future state has become the current state. I guess I was confused in all these conversations previously and thought that that wasn't happening until 2027 as well. But is that just the error rate 2027? So when did the future state become the current state in terms of those, like age 65, now it's down to 55?
Upon passage on July 4th.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so have those folks had been notified?
They had not been notified because we didn't have any guidance from the federal government as to what the content of the notification should be and how we should implement and operationalize the work requirements. We didn't, and we're not alone. Many, many states, except for the states that already had work requirements, which were only two, they had essentially a head start. But other states, we thought we should make sure we have federal guidance so that we're not doing anything that's outside of that. But that was not the expectation, even though that had been communicated from time to time that federal guidance was forthcoming. It did not come. And then when it did come, and we asked whether or not we could use the guidance immediately or whether we were expected to apply those standards retroactively, we were told that it was upon passage. Essentially, that was our problem, that we hadn't done that, and that we needed to work very quickly in order to come into compliance, which is what we have been doing. But with that said, Representative, we weren't just sitting around waiting for guidance, right? We were already doing a lot of the work that you see here, which is determining who we believed would be exempt, who wouldn't be exempt, which which towns we thought would be impacted by the changes in the percentages of unemployment. All of that work was already being done in preparation for when the guidance is actually issued so that we could operationalize it immediately, which is why we're able to operationalize it immediately because we've already done all of that work.
Thank you.
So Commissioner, my understanding is that you are going to be leaving in a couple of minutes.
I am.
Is your staff able to stay to answer some
Oh,
questions?
absolutely.
Okay,
Yes.
great.
I am speaking for them and hoping that that's true, but they're wonderful and they are here. So we have obviously Deputy Commissioner Peter Hadler, and right behind him, we have Dan Giacomi, who is a nationally recognized expert. We're very lucky to have him in the state of Connecticut on SNAP. They are more than qualified to answer any of these questions. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And so Representative Baker, you had your hand up a long time ago and it's not up. Did you have another question or any questions, sir? If you are still on. All righty. So I'm going to go back and forth between those who are here and those who are online so that we can go back and forth. Representative Ackert, followed by Representative Martinez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner and Deputy Commissioner. I really appreciate this opportunity to ask questions and really learned a lot from your presentation. So thank you so much. Just for clarity, it sounds like, it's going to be a long question because we only get two, but it sounds like approximately 36,000 people will lose benefits because of the work requirement. So if that is correct, what are work requirements and volunteer requirements that an individual would have to maintain their benefits?
So they have to have a total of 80 hours monthly of a combination of either working at a rate that brings in 80 hours times, which is essentially the federal minimum wage. So if they have that income, then they meet they're actually called community engagement requirements. You can volunteer for that amount of time. You can be enrolled in school, or you can be enrolled in some sort of vocational work-related program. Those are the four major categories of community engagement requirements. And it can be a combination of any of those things. So if you're a full-time student and that is an equivalent to 80 hours of classwork and being in a classroom, and maybe perhaps you have a part-time job or sometimes several as a student, then you would qualify. If you're working or you have some income that's equivalent to 80 hours times the federal minimum wage, which is $7.44 an hour, then I think that's right. I think it's actually $7.29, but then you would then meet the requirement. So you have to fit into those categories, either one of them exclusively or all of them through some combination of work.
Thank you. So that's my first question. So I appreciate that opportunity to understand a little bit more what really we need to do to get these people. So if they want to keep the benefits, they've got to, fit one of those four categories. So thank you for that. And then I'll skip and go to the error rates. And I did look at Connecticut's history on error rates. And prior to 2019, Connecticut was consistently under 6%. So we would not have fallen in any penalty. But since that time, we have escalated, as you mentioned. I think it was like 8.75, I believe you said in your comment. What was the difference before 2019 and the error rates, and why did that jump after that time frame to a higher elevation? And I do appreciate all the work you're intending to do regarding getting those down, and that's impressive. But I was curious as to why the jump after 2019.
We're going to ask our SNAP director, Dan Giacomi, to come up and answer that question for you, so you can get
Thank you.
a thorough answer. Thank you. Now, I know he didn't think that.
And please please introduce yourself, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Dan Giacomi. I'm the Director of Program Oversight and Grant Administration at DSS, also serving as the State SNAP Director. Specific to that question, there was actually a few changes in federal policy prior to 2019 that were then enacted as a result of a Government Accountability Office or GAO review where they identified or believed that states were implementing what they considered to be bias within the quality control process. What they believed was happening was that states were looking at their quality control reviews prior to submitting them to the federal review system and manipulating some of the numbers in order to make themselves appear to be in a better position than perhaps they were. Connecticut was not involved within that report or that system. There were a number of states, if you were to look up the media reports, that were fined pretty heavily for having done that. However, they then made changes to the ways in which states could conduct those reviews and implement the case changes as well as add those reviews to the quality control system. And as a result of that, the national average, including here in Connecticut, was increased. They also made some changes into what's called the FNS, or Food and Nutrition Services, as it was called, 310 handbook, which is the handbook that guides the quality control reviewers. It tells them how to conduct a review, what they need to do, the areas that they need to review, and the things that they need to look at and gather documentation. As a result of both of those, as I said, we saw a marked increase nationwide as well as in the state here on the payment error rates.
Thank you for that answer. And I did notice that it was countrywide, not just the state of Connecticut in terms of the escalated rates. So thank you, Madam Chair. Those are the two questions for now. Thank you. And thank you for those answers.
Thank you. Representative Martinez, followed by Representative Dillon.
Hello, and I do want to thank you so much for all of the work that you guys are doing. I've been speaking with my town's food pantry over the last couple of weeks in Plainville, the Plainville Food Pantry, along with I've been speaking with Food Share. Plainville is currently not part of Food Share, and Food Share is in the position right now where they cannot take any new applications at this time. At the same time, I'm coming in today and I'm seeing Plainville's bright blue on the map for towns that previously had a time limit waiver. So my first question is, I'm wondering if there's going to be more specific data town by town on how many people are impacted and how many people are impacted without access to those key programs like Food Share.
We can certainly provide that. Yes,
Okay.
I wasn't aware that that pantry was not part of Food Share. So we'll have to communicate with Food Share to get a more specific list of pantries and in pantries in different towns and municipalities that are part of their network and not. It'll take us a little while to compile that, but we can do that.
That would be great. And
Okay.
then my follow-up question was to see if the state was looking at increasing the Food Share mobile trucks, because I know that those do come in, they're really important for, say, towns like mine that may have a Food Share mobile truck in a nearby town or possibly in my town, where people in my town will be able to resource and utilize that.
Yes. Well, and not that long ago, you might recall that there was a press conference at Food Share where there was a significant investment in CT-NAP in the state. I don't know if that actually translates into more mobile food pantries throughout the state, but I could certainly bring that back to Jason, who runs Food Share, and find that out for you. Okay.
Thank you. Representative Dillon, followed by Representative Haddad.
Thank you very much, and thank you for all of the work that you're doing. I guess Peter would be the person I'm addressing, Madam Chair. And I have a lot of questions. I'll ask two of them. One is just clarity on reducing the error rate for gig workers. Is there in place, or is there potential for working with some of the larger employers in a partnership to get more accurate wages?
There is not a plan in place. So the reason that I'm sort of taking a breath before I answer your question is that it's a complicated one, even though it may not seem that way in the way in which you posed it. One of which is that the gig workers are often independent contractors that don't have a relationship with an employer. So it's more difficult to get information from them. They only have a contractual relationship, let's say with their rideshare company. And getting the information from the rideshare company as opposed to the independent contractor is a very different road to navigate than getting information from employers. Getting information from employers that issue W-2s is not really our issue, right? Because that's predictable. We can get that from, it's the frequency with which we can get that we're working with the Department of Labor on, because if we can get that more frequently, then that can help to reduce our error rate, because then we can update the information around their wages and salaries more frequently, and that would help. And the other piece of it is really with our gig economy. And that is really speaks directly to the last bullet that we had on our last slide, which is being able to get different kinds of ways that we can get information about gig economy. I wouldn't call them wages, but income that they're earning. Because as I said, one week they could be working, they could be driving 25 hours, and the next week they're driving 12 hours. And that's all self-reported, right? Recorded through their apps. We're not necessarily going to always get that information from those rideshare companies. That's going to come directly from those independent contractors. That's the part that's more complex. And that's the part that we're working on, trying to figure whether or not there's a technological solution through different vendors and the ones that we use now to get wage data for people who have W-2s.
Thank you. And yeah, the issue of independent contractors in addition is very complex. So I
Yes.
won't go into that. And I'm sorry, I was addressing to Peter. I didn't see that I thought that you were leaving at noon.
Everyone's anxious for me to go, and perhaps I will, but
No, I'm glad.
Couple more minutes.
I'm glad you were here and I appreciate it. My
Okay.
second question is about school meals and the relationship between SNAP and school meals. My understanding last summer, if everything was perfect and everybody that should be on SNAP is on SNAP under the big, bad, beautiful, whatever bill, that 12,000 families would lose eligibility for school lunches. And I don't know if that's an accurate number, but I wonder if there's a separate analysis and a separate remedy for families who could potentially lose eligibility for reduced school lunches because of the relationship with SNAP.
Yeah, thank you, Representative Dillon. It is a good question. It's one that we have looked into on one level, and we can probably do additional analysis. I will note that we don't anticipate an immediate impact on the school lunch program because the folks who are potentially losing SNAP benefits under these changes are primarily adults. So to the extent that the children in households are still maintaining benefits, that's information that we're able to provide to the State Department of Education and maintain those children's enrollment in the National School Breakfast and Lunch programs. So I don't anticipate a major impact, but I think we can, do the one population that may be at risk is folks who have the non-citizen status who previously qualified. If there's any children within that population who may lose benefits as a result of that, they would potentially correspondingly lose that automatic determination for the school lunch and breakfast program. They would still potentially have an opportunity to provide that information directly to the schools themselves and qualify in that way. But let me take that back and see if there's anything that I'm not thinking of right this moment that we need to do some further analysis on to see if there's that significant of an impact.
Thank you. And I know that this whole topic is enormous, but the subtopic, which is equally complex, is LHEAP and school lunches, or how SNAP interfaces with other programs. So any separate analysis you could provide us with, that would be really helpful. And thank you for all of the work that you're doing. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Dillon. And Representative Haddad, before you go, I just want to make sure that everybody understands that we will be having another informational hearing with all the other agencies that have to do with food. That includes the Department of Agriculture, the State Department of Education, the Department of Aging and Disabilities, Department of Public Health. All of them have complications relative to this, and by saying this out loud, if I did not mention you and you are having anything to do with any food program, please start getting your PowerPoints prepared, because we will want to see that. In addition to that, I want to make sure everybody understands on another clarification, not a question, is that there are more than 40,000 people involved in SNAP. There's some 400,000 people that will all see rules change as of November 1. And so that $70 million a month program is going to see other changes. So it's not just this small group that we're considering right now. Over the next couple of months, there will be more problems that are arising. And I wanted people to understand that we have close to 400,000 people in the state that participate in some form or another in the SNAP program, and that equates to approximately $70 million a month in SNAP. And for those of you online who may not be able to see it, both Deputy Commissioner and Commissioner are shaking their heads yes. So when we're talking about this, I want everybody to understand this is a much bigger problem than the small numbers we're talking about now. And that's why we're going to invite the other agencies in for similar questions. We think that this is an important component, and we're going to try to squeeze it in as soon as possible because we are hoping to go in on a special session and addressing this issue, but we want to make sure we have the data to do so. And so I just want you to all understand that piece of it. And we have Representative Haddad, followed by Representative Hoxha.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And as the commissioner leaves, I just wanted to thank her again for participating today. Your information has been very helpful. I want to just pick up on a brief comment that picks up on where Senator Austin just left off. For 10 years, I was on the board of a community action program, 4 years as chair. I can tell you that the people who work at those programs and who help do outreach and eligibility for the SNAP program are terrific people. They do hard work. They are not state employees and don't enjoy many of the benefits that state employees get. I think that the folks at the Department of Social Services that do similar work are great as well. But as a former board chair, I'd be remiss if I didn't say that we really need to pay attention to our cap agencies. They are stressed. They are facing significant changes as they deal not just with this program, but changes to other federal programs. And we need to make sure that we don't lose capacity, the capacity that they have to provide services to people in our state as they transition to the new rules as well. And so I just wanted to put in a word for them. I wanted to ask a question about the SNAP employment and training programs. My understanding is that they don't lose money directly, but as we're talking about the increased demand for work programs and employment, that many of the folks who will be facing the work requirement for the first time will be, I expect that demand on the SNAP E&T programs will also increase. Can you just tell me a little bit about how the SNAP E&T program, which I think is called Connecticut Pathways here in Connecticut, is funded, and what planning is being made to help those programs handle the increase in training and demand that might be required by the loss of eligibility or the change in eligibility guidelines?
That is an excellent question, and I'm happy to have the expert in SNAP E&T sitting next to me. So I'm going to pass the microphone to Dan Giacomi, who will answer the question about SNAP E&T.
Thank you. So the SNAP Employment and Training Program is actually funded by the providers themselves in large part. It's typically a reimbursement program. So every dollar that the providers put in, they are reimbursed 50 cents. We also have limited administrative funding that comes from the federal government to provide to not only staff members on my team that oversee the program itself, but many of the coordinators themselves that work in our partners' organizations, whether it be the community colleges or community-based organizations. So by and large, it is the providers that are putting forward the funds to actually provide the training programs themselves to individuals. sorry, to your second piece as well as the planning that we've been doing. We've been meeting with our Office of Workforce Strategy, our governor's office, as well as the American Job Centers and other organizations that provide training to see how we can collectively come up with a plan to ensure that we're meeting the needs, whether it is cross promotion or referrals to different organizations, or looking at areas in which training is already provided that we could then tap them to become a contracted partner to receive the reimbursement from the federal government to reinvest into the program or to utilize in addition to the funds that they're already spending.
I was looking at the website around the Connecticut Pathways program. Is it safe to say that most of the participants in Pathways participate through a community college in Connecticut?
That is safe to say, yes. We do have some community-based organizations. However, they're specialized in different areas of the state as well as different populations. We have homeless hospitality, for example, that specializes in our homeless population as well as those that are perhaps learning English as a second language. We have an organization in Hartford that does those re-entering the community from incarceration. But by and large, it is with the community colleges that we partner.
I'm prohibited by decorum from asking a third question, but know that I'd be interested in knowing at some point, like how much our community colleges and the other private partners are spending on their ENT programs and what their anticipated costs would be to ensure that they're continue to meet demand.
Sure,
Thank
we
you.
can definitely provide that to you.
Thank you, Representative Haddad, for following decorum, which I think you always do anyways. Representative Hoxa, you're up now, followed by Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Couple quick questions. Do we have any idea whether it's an exact number or an estimation of how many undocumented individuals benefit from SNAP programs in Connecticut?
Yes, the answer is 0.
I think that there's a difference between undocumented and those that are in immigration statuses that are here legally, so.
Correct. Yep. There's, I was looking at the document. There's a few different statuses one could have other than illegal, but also not be a citizen. Second question, do we know as a percent per person, per individual, what in terms of SNAP benefits for those that are receiving it? Do we have an idea, percent breakdown on an individual basis?
I could try to maybe reframe your question. Are you looking for the average benefit amount per person from the SNAP program?
Right. The dollar amount per person that receives SNAP benefits.
Yeah, it's approximately $190 per month per person.
Okay, and the total you said was, I think I saw in the documents that 55,000 were at, there was a number of 55,000 numbered. Can you clarify what that means?
I think I need a little more context as to which number you're referring to.
In one of the original slides, the slides aren't up right now, but so you said 119 people, $119 per person per month. And how many individuals are receiving that number in the state of Connecticut? I guess that'll give us the answer regardless of what the slide says.
So it's $190, just to clarify.
90, okay, yep.
Average benefit per person. At any point in time during the year, we have approximately 360,000 people enrolled, but the number fluctuates, which is why you see some numbers around the 400,000. Some people come on and some come off. SNAP is a flexible safety net program that serves people as they need it and as they and when they don't, they leave. So it's got a the numbers served over time, over a year, is different from the number enrolled at any given point in time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Hoxa. Representative Johnson is followed by Representative Corpus, who is online but on phone and can't be moved over. So I'm going to try to figure this out. But Representative Johnson first and then Representative Corpus. Oh, I see you there, Representative Corpus. Now you're on here. Thank you. Go
Thank you
ahead,
so,
Representative
thank you.
Johnson.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you to the Commissioner and all of you for being here today to provide us with this amazing information, which we're still trying to, get a handle on. I represent the 49th House District, which has this Covenant Soup Kitchen and the Community Food Pantry Cooperative. My Covenant Soup Kitchen, last I heard a few months ago, delivers about 1 million meals a year. And the community food pantry says that they are providing food to hundreds of people a day here in Wyndham. So we are really concerned. And on the radio, we had one of the people who manages the Ray Armini on the air saying that he's in a desperate situation to make sure that we have more food. This is before the cuts to the SNAP program. And so I have him on our radio show coming up Friday, tomorrow, and he is going to talk about how we have been limited by there is a excess or food share maybe program that our soup kitchens are able to get additional food from, and that warehouse food, lack for a better term or knowing what the actual term is dwindling down so that there isn't that much available. And they're in a panic now to try and provide more food access, given the data I just shared with you. So I have a couple of questions based on that. One is the fact that the soup kitchen access available food that they're getting from surplus farm food. This is a national issue because I was on a webinar with people from all over the country, and this is a food problem that's national. Are you
Representative
familiar with
Johnson,
this? Are you familiar with that?
Johnson,
I'm
I
sorry?
don't know if you can hear me, but Representative Johnson, if we could get to the question, because I have a lot of people after you.
I'm
and I
trying
wanna
to get
make
to the
sure that
question now,
everybody-
but I need to explain where this information came from. And
But
so
we don't
I
need
just
that
wanted
right
to,
now. If you could just ask
so
the question, that would be
So
really helpful.
so okay,
Thank you.
then where is how are we going to make up for the extra food that they're able to get?
Thank you for the question. I don't know if I have an answer for that one. We were able to sort of support Connecticut Food Share as a funder when dollars are allocated, and also to be able to utilize some of the federal programs where we help to route food to them and help them support the existing federal programs. I'm not sure that we have other tools to be able to expand beyond that, given within the current SNAP program.
Okay, the second question is, we have a town exemption here according to the map, and so I just wondered, could you explain the town exemption and provide me with additional information on how I can fully understand what we have here as an exemption and what we're losing?
Sure. So prior to July 4th, there were rules in place that allowed the state to identify towns and areas where there was a lack of employment under a formula that no longer exists. That was a formula that we applied to towns around the state. Since the new bill was passed and removed this waiver exemption to exempt by geographic area, the only towns that are allowed to be excluded in their entirety are those that have a 10% unemployment rate, which no towns in Connecticut currently do. So any individuals in your town that previously were covered by the town exemption will now be subject to the work requirement rules, and individuals will need to either identify compliance with those rules in order to maintain their benefits, or another exemption that they may qualify in order to be exempt from those work requirements.
Thank you for that, and I will try and get more information from you online, or could you just send me the details of that?
Certainly.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Representative Corpus, followed by Representative Kennedy.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for accommodating me before when I was on the phone. And thank you for this presentation. I had a question about this, two questions. The first is about the 6% error rate. In your opinion, what is a reasonable error rate for this kind of business? Some businesses, customer service, have error rates of 1 to 2%. the more human involvement, obviously, the higher the error rate. This is a very human endeavor. What is a reasonable error rate for the delivery of SNAP benefits, and how long do you think it will take us to get from 8 roughly down to the 6?
There are so many factors that go into the process for determining an error rate, right? It's a complicated and sort of federally driven process about how we document. The quality control process often has the luxury of looking back and collecting information that may not have been available at the time that a determination was made, which is a challenge that we work through within the program all the time. They know that there are errors that are included that are by and large out of the control of the agency, though we will be striving to reduce those as well. We have, a maximum level of effort that we're currently putting forward to try and get that error rate down below that 6% threshold within the current framework for how the error rate is determined. We are working to get that as low as possible. We are all fully conscious of the potential state budget impact. And so we are taking, every step that we're able to help and reduce that rate.
Thank you. And thank you for the work you're doing, because I know of the buckets of states above the 6%, of which there are 43 states. We're in the lowest bucket, under 8%. So that's a function of your good work. So thank you. Second question is, for the four-pronged work eligibility requirements that you went through with Representative Acker, we may well be faced in special session with the alternatives of dollar for dollar backfilling what folks in Connecticut are losing by virtue of this bill at the federal level. That's one option. And the other is, which I think, I don't know yet, would be better, is to encourage and support them to meet the work requirements so that we don't lose a dollar of this federal money. They don't lose a dollar of this federal money. In your opinion, could we do that? Could we, in a more economical way than just replacing the monies lost, could we help and support them through nonprofits, through state allocations, to actually go out and do 80 hours of volunteer work, which comes down to, 80 hours a month is 20 hours a week, which is about 4 hours a day in a typical work week. In your opinion, which model is better? Could we help support them to fulfill the requirements versus dollar for dollar making up the money shortfall?
Yeah, I don't think that's an either or question. I think it's really both approaches. We are very much wanting to make sure that people who are able to work, to have the opportunity and capacity to link with those folks who can provide, work or volunteer opportunities. But we also need to recognize that some individuals have some very significant barriers to even being able to do that. For example, just the homeless population, that is a very a preliminary barrier that needs to be often addressed prior to being able to engage at the level that would ensure compliance. We want to make sure that we have pathways to ensure that people have the basic needs for those who need it, while also providing avenues of opportunity for those who are able to and have the access to opportunity to fulfill the hourly requirements under the work requirement structure.
And last follow-up, where would you guess or predict, or where do you think that line is? If there are, 100 people who are facing this cutoff because of the new work requirements, how many of those do you think we could support to fulfill the work requirements? What percent would you say, and what percent really can't? Is it 50-50? Is it 80-20? Do you have any sense of that?
I don't have that off the top of my head. I think there have been some studies into this that we can share about experience in other states about the impact of work requirements. For example, in the Medicaid space, we've seen the experience from other states is that it doesn't line up very well. Georgia, that then implemented work requirements in the Medicaid program, had some really unfortunate outcomes where eligible people were unable to comply, largely due to administrative burdens and hurdles. And there's also, of course, the localized challenge in any given community, which may vary from one place to another, about the ability to access opportunities for jobs. So I think it is a multifaceted question that can't be answered quite so simply, but we can certainly share some of the research that has been done in this space about the impact of work requirements in these programs.
I think that would be very helpful before the session because we can help those two populations of people in different ways. And the objective is to help anyone who is affected by this bill. Thank you for all the good work you're doing. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Corpus. And I would remind everybody that it's a two-question kind of thing, but we are getting close to, we have one more person who is speaking for the first time. I'd like those who have not spoken for the first time to consider their options now because I'm going into the next round for a couple of people and want that people to understand that. So if you have not spoken for the first time, please let us know. And we will go to you before we go to the people who have a couple of questions. And when you provide us with the data, can you provide us with the list of states who have done the work requirements and it ended up costing them significantly more money? Or let's not, I don't want to clarify it like that, but what is the dollar amount for this increased concern on working requirements? That would be helpful so that we can see, what are we doing here? Are we costing ourselves more money by this innate need to, and I think that work requirements, we've had work requirements for a lot of years, and for a lot of people it works out, and for a certain group it just doesn't. So, Representative Kennedy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you all for being here. And I don't want to dwell on this. We've established this is a difficult conversation. Food is a basic need. And we've talked a lot about the error rate, but I just have a clarifying question on that. With the error rate, there was problems back in the summer. We were hearing of misuse of the EBT cards or them not properly working or other just breakdown of the use of that. Would that be considered part of the error rate when it's either misuse or stolen cards? Or there was at one point people were saying that our EBT cards were used in another state. Would that fall into the same category as the error rates? I said that correctly.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'm trying to sort of synthesize the complexities of the quality control process with that issue. By and large, what we are looking at when we're talking about the payment error rate is the determination of a person's eligibility and the amount of the benefits that they get, not necessarily how those benefits are used after that fact or misused in the form of stolen benefits, which we've experienced as a national problem around the country. So that is something that is addressed outside of the payment error rate quality control calculation. And it is something that is, that we work with with our federal partners to pursue, as a criminal matter.
Thank you, sir, for clarifying that. I appreciate it. And just one last question, and I'm not sure if it's, is there any potential for an extension for any of these enacting benefits changes, or is there a possibility of this impacts so many people?
It's a fair question. The short answer is likely no, but there is I'm going to call it a loophole that was kind of built into the federal legislation where if a state has a payment error rate above 13.4%, they are actually exempt from contributing state benefits for a state portion of the benefits for several years. This was primarily targeted to the state of Alaska as part of the HR 1 negotiations. And so some states, I think there are maybe more states in that bucket than there are under 6% right now. And they will, by virtue of their bad payment error rate, be exempt from contributing to the cost of SNAP benefits for multiple years.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Representative Sims for the first time.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Commissioner, and your staff for being before us today. First, I just want to say, I have a great deal of constituents who depend on these SNAP benefits. So this is, I really am thankful for all of you, for all the work that you guys are doing, and I'm sure my constituents will be happy with a lot of the information that's coming back from this group. But my question to you is going to be around equity and vulnerable groups. And is there some sort of a breakout or breakdown with regards to the SNAP participation for with age and household types? So we can kind of get a better understanding of what residents are most at risk and under the new requirements.
Yes, thank you,
Yes, thank you,
Representative.
Representative.
We have a good amount of publicly available data on the demographic characteristics of individuals and families who are enrolled in the SNAP program. I'd be happy to share that information and point it out. There's some things that are available on our website. We have data dashboards that you can navigate and get down to a lot of different ways of looking at our data, as well as on the open data portal. More concretely to the impact that we are likely to experience within this ABOD population and some of the changes that we just discussed today. Some of that information I think is in the maps, but we can also try to drill down a little bit further. We're happy to try and provide more detailed information about the populations that are impacted. Obviously, some of them are by definition individuals between the ages of 55 and 64, and some of them will be people who had previously been exempt due to their veteran or homeless status. And then there's the portion that is sort of town driven, which will likely reflect the town's overall demographics more than anything else.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. That's going to be extremely helpful if you can get that information to me. And I have my last question here is with regards to access and support as well. So I just want to know what DSS plans are with regards to ensuring all eligible residents can access SNAP benefits despite the new work and reporting rules.
Thank you. I think that's a very important question. It is something that we strive to achieve every day as an agency, is to identify and support individuals who are eligible to get the benefits that they are entitled to. We will be working on communications campaigns and education, both directly to the clients who are potentially impacted, as well as our partners who can help support individuals through this process. We recognize that it's not the simplest thing to do and to understand. So we will be working to ensure that that information is available in as many locations as possible, and that people have the opportunity to identify other exemptions or to demonstrate their compliance with the work requirements prior to their benefits ending.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that answer, and then thank you again, Madam Chair, for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Now we're going on to those who have questions for the second time around. And I do have one quick question relative to the Native American communities that we have there. I noticed on one of the slides that has been a called out population. How does that fit in?
Yeah, thank you, Senator Austin. That is a minor new exempt category that was introduced with HR 1. There are very specific definitions behind the terminology that you see on the screen between Indian, Urban Indian, or Californian Indian. These are certain Native American populations who will now be exempt. We will be working to incorporate that information into our communications and our platforms so that people who may qualify under that exemption can be identified and identify themselves.
And you would let us know if our 2 federally recognized tribal nations, or the 5 of which 2 are federally recognized, state recognized tribes, are able to participate, or are they exempt in some way or another, if we could understand how that fits in. And if someone's a California Indian, if they live in Connecticut, are they qualified? I am not trying to be sarcastic. I'm trying to understand what we're talking about here. And I'm not really understanding what the terminology relative to urban Indian. Does that mean if we have someone who is here who may be associated to another tribal nation, are they qualified? And is this something that we're going to have to kind of figure out in the membership lists of those particular tribal nations? How is that going to be added in to our awareness of this population of people?
Thank you. It's a great question. I need to go back and look at those definitions to be able to help explain how that might work. By and large, I would say that for the example of the Californian who's living in Connecticut, they would be eligible unless there's a unless part of the definition requires them to actually be in California at the time. But by and large, it's a national program, so these definitions would apply to individuals if this is a characteristic that they carry with them regardless of where they're living. Then they would be eligible if they were living here in Connecticut. So there's a little bit of additional information that we can do some clarification on to help individuals who may qualify under that exemption to identify themselves and for us to be able to identify them.
And as a matter of information, I'm not certain who asked the question on businesses that are engaged in participating in food distribution or applying some of their resources to food distribution. Last night we had a fundraiser for Gemma Moran, a large food pantry in Eastern Connecticut, doing a lot of work. And they had that fundraiser raised 20% of their needed revenue for the year, with the two federally recognized tribal nations each donating from the tribal nations themselves, plus more from the individual members that were there. But the two federally recognized tribal nations each donated $20,000 to the Gemma Moran facility. And I know that that's true of Electric Boat and some of the other larger businesses in Eastern Connecticut. I'm certain that that is true of the larger businesses around the state. So that tend to participate in some of these. And I think it's necessary. But I don't know that that's new money because they've done this each year. So I just want to make sure that people understand that that's already calculated into their revenue sources. So Representative Walker, followed by Representative Acker.
Thank you again for all you do and how you're helping us out. I just want to piggyback off of what Senator Austin was talking about, the food pantries. I've had food pantries contact me because of the way that they have to make declaration to the state, to the revenue services on the products that they are handing out. And a lot of them have said that I think it's once you get over, I think $500,000 worth of goods and services, you have to have a formal audit, which is going to be extremely hard. And I guarantee you our food pantries are going to have larger numbers than we've seen ever before because of what's going on, because I believe that's so. I would like to find out the details of what the requirements are for them, because if they have to do an audit, most of them don't have cash. I mean, they're doing product, they're moving product from one place to another. Granted, it's coming through their system, but their ability to provide the needed paperwork should not cost them $25,000, because that they would use that for staff or for food. So I would like to try and figure out how we can help in this process to help the food pantries get through that challenge economically, because then that's going to end up, money's not going to be able, things aren't going to be able to get out to the community. So.
Thank you, Representative. That does sound like a significant challenge. I'm not sure that these are rules that would be coming out through us at DSS. You know, there are certain programs that we pass through federal dollars and food through that. Again, much of that goes to food share as the point, and they are aware and prepared and do those audit functions. I'd be happy to try and investigate this further, but I'm not sure it's a DSS requirement that they have those
It
audits.
probably isn't, but somehow I'm sure it's going to, they're going to be worked together. So I just have to find the other agency that's doing it and have them sit with you so that we can all have an agreement. So if you help me with this, I would really appreciate it, because I do not want them to fall short out there because we didn't know and answer the questions that help them operate better. So that's important. And my second question is, you may have covered this, you may have said it, but I have an overload here. Have notices already gone out to people who are in jeopardy now? Has that already happened? And if not, when will those notices go out? and what will be the time frame that we have to address them so that they, if we can, resolve their whatever dilemma that they're having. So those dates don't ring in my notes.
Yes, sure. We anticipate that the first round of communications related to these, the ABOD changes is going to go out on November 3rd. So that would be by mail or by for those who choose to do electronic mail, they'll get electronic notification. We will also be accompanying that with text messaging communications to ensure that people have as many avenues of being alerted as possible. They will receive a secondary notice later in the month of November if they are at risk of having their benefits close at the end of the month. That's a standard operating process. So we've flagged November 30th as a day, but that's a day before which they will receive notice. So it's really going to be in the month of November, those communications ramp up for folks. The number of people who we anticipate having benefits closed at the end of the month or for the month of December is relatively small, right? We've identified about 1,500 people that we anticipate will be impacted immediately. Other folks will still have a few of those 3 months out of 36 months that they'll be allowed to maintain benefits. But we will be conducting communication campaigns fairly broadly to alert people to the changes in the program, as well as targeted messaging for individuals who we've identified as likely to be impacted or losing an exemption.
By sliding 2.5. So the people that are affected in the town, the people that, yes, I am, but the people who are in the towns who are no longer exempt, are they part of that 1,000 that you just quoted to me, or is that a whole nother ballgame?
That is exactly the population. It's the first 1,500 people who, the challenge, of course, is that everybody's got a different number of months that they have qualified for previously under this framework. So we know that about 1,500 people will be in that first cohort who have exhausted their 3 months. And then there will be different numbers for people who have 1 month left, 2 months left, or will be able to have 3 months prior to exhausting their benefits. So it's going to play out over the course of December, January, and February.
Thank you, and thank you for all your information. Thank you.
Sure. Representative Ackert, followed by Representative Gilchrist.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, thank you for the continued answers about these questions. It's enlightening. I did see that the federal funding for administrative costs we're going to reduce. You get 75% reimbursement now, I believe is what I'm reading, and then or covered, and it's going to drop to 50%. I take it that's staff members also that are being funded to administer the costs. Is that correct? And what is the amount of money, what is the administrative cost overall to run the SNAP program?
Yep, thank you, Representative. Right now, it's a 50-50 split between the states and the feds. That will be changing so that the states now have to carry 75% of the administrative costs. We are currently estimating that will be an additional $40 million in state contributions to the cost of administration for the program. The total amount is about $160 million annually to administer the program.
Thank you. So let me, I guess I was misinformed. I believe that, I remember federal's covering 75%, and you're saying they only cover 50%. Now the state's going to have to do 75%?
Yeah, that's correct. The administrative costs for the program are 50-50 in SNAP, and that's changing to become 75% state and 25% federal.
Okay. Thank you for that correction. Appreciate that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Representative Gilchrist, followed by Representative Haddad.
Thank you, Madam Chair. All right, second two. With the broad marketing, I guess my question has to do, will you be issuing notices to recipients to start maintaining records? Or is that part of that broad marketing so that folks know that piece is changing and that they should better document?
Yeah, we will be alerting people that there are changes coming. And I think it's important for people to have that general awareness so that they can access, the tools that we want to be able to provide them with, so that they understand the process, what might be needed to comply. It can vary depending on a person's exemption, what kind of documentation they might need to provide or not. So that complexity is something we want to help people to know. So there will be a combination of a broad awareness of the changes, and then folks can we'll identify if they're potentially eligible for one kind of exemption or another and what it would require to be able to demonstrate that or to demonstrate compliance with the hours, which we know some folks will also need to do. So it's a bit of a complex messaging, but we do want to make sure that people have that full scope of information about how to either identify and prove an exemption or what they need to do to be able to provide information that demonstrates they're in compliance with the hours or dollars requirements.
Thank you. And then my second question, earlier we discussed the potential impact of the government shutdown should it stay closed. Would you be able to follow up with the Appropriates Committee to let us know what the potential impact is, just so we have that information?
Yes, certainly. I can just preliminarily tell you right now that, there's a couple of possibilities. The way that FNS has advised us, again, that's the Food and Nutrition Services, that they do not want states to send benefit files after the end of this month. So for November benefits, they're not prepared to be able to reimburse the retailers for any benefits that would be issued after that time. So that could lead to two possibilities. One, which is that everyone who is currently enrolled won't be able to access won't receive November benefits. And there's also the possibility that anyone who has benefits on their card won't be able to use them. So there's two slightly different. It may be, just no new benefits, but it also may mean no access to any of the benefits that you may have on your card. And that's something we're still trying to get a better understanding from the federal government about what their plans are. And that will help us to be able to advise and message around this if the shutdown persists that long.
So Representative Haddad has said he's all set right now. Senator Lesser.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm still struck at just the immense cruelty of HR 1 and this administration. Just so we understand the overall the issue that we're up against in 2 weeks, which is the potential suspension of the overall SNAP program. How many people, just for right now, I saw there was a press account in the Insider yesterday that sort of estimated, but how many people are in SNAP and how many households are in SNAP?
As of this month, approximately 360,000 individuals and 210,000 households.
Okay, thank you. And then just with regard to, you mentioned this, that was my first question. Second question, you discussed the federal funds that are coming to support this. There have been a zillion strings attached to federal funding recently under this administration and some pretty convoluted ones. So as we're looking at the federal data hub that I understand you're exploring and the other federal funds, what strings are attached that we know about? Are there other issues? Are there other things that we should be worried about in terms of the integrity of Connecticut's data and how it could be used or misused by malevolent forces?
Thank you for that question. The way that the Federal Data Services Hub currently is constructed is it's a limited ping of data for Medicaid. That's what we use it for, to match up against federal data sources such as IRS data, Social Security Administration data, to be able to determine if a person's eligible for Medicaid. We have not seen any specific changes to the way that functions as sort of a one-time, report back to the state when we put in information. As far as the terms and conditions for various federal funds, those are scrutinized very carefully by the agency and the Office of the Attorney General whenever there are changes to the terms and conditions to evaluate the risk to the state.
And my first question was barely a question. So just to be just a bit, is that data is that going to reside in Connecticut servers or is that going to be in federal servers?
The Federal Data Services Hub, my understanding is that it is not retained by the federal government. It is sort of just a real-time bounce back of information. That information does need to be recorded by the state so that we can have the documentation and the trail of eligibility for individuals. But that's the eligibility side of things. There are other avenues where we share information with the federal government because we're required to in order to administer the programs. For example, Medicaid claims that are submitted are required as a condition of administering the program and have historically always been used. There was a recent court case that enjoined the federal government from using it the way that they had indicated they would be using it for sharing with Homeland Security purposes. So that just came out fairly recently, and we continue to monitor and stay engaged on any time that we are sharing information with the federal government that it is used in how we understand it should be used under law.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to be clear on the town exemptions. Do you have information about how many towns that have exemptions and what the population is?
That was in our PowerPoint, 68.
Yeah, I know it, but I have a problem here with understanding the exemptions, what the rules are. He stated the rules. I'm going to take a look at the rules and hand them over back to my soup kitchen. And then the other thing is I don't know if he really understood what I was asking him about the food share, the federal extra food. Do you understand that question?
If it doesn't have to do with SNAP, I think that has to do
It
with
does have to do with SNAP because it has to do with how our soup kitchen works.
USDA. I think it's a USDA thing, and we're going to have another forum on all of the other agencies that are incorporated into food distribution.
Okay. Well, I just want to be
I think
clear
you'll
on
get a
what
lot of
I'm,
your answers that way. That's why I'm saying that. I think that I think we do need to have that other
Yeah.
question. So.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And to be clear, just so I am not stepping over myself, it's a cost benefit analysis that I want to know on implementing the work requirements. So I have no other people asking any questions. I appreciate everybody. Again, you're going to get some more information. Pay attention to that information. If you have specific questions about the information that you get, let us know, and we'll ask those questions so that they can be part of the presentations by the agencies that we're going to have come in. We, again, appreciate everything. Please tell the commissioner that we appreciated all of her information. And we look forward to working with you. And over the next little bit of time, we're going to have a lot more questions. Thank you. Everybody have a nice day.
Thank you.